I was still crying over my Richard's death when my own children, Melissa and David, walked into the room. There were no tears in their eyes, just coldness. Melissa said, without blinking, "We sold your jewelry, Mom. Now we're going to live for real, far away from here." And David added, laughing, "There's no point in clinging to memories of Dad." My heart stopped at that moment. I never could have imagined that my children, so loved by me and my dear Richard, would say those cruel words that still echo in every corner of my mind. Melissa and David were the greatest gifts God gave us. They grew up surrounded by love, by sacrifices that Richard and I made without ever complaining, all so that they would never want for anything. I believed, with all my heart, that the bond we built was unbreakable. But that day, their words cut my soul like sharp blades. My name is Evelyn Parker, and when my husband Richard died in my arms on a cold winter morning in Boston, I thought the pain couldn't be greater. I was wrong. The true agony was yet to come. I remember every detail of that morning. The clock on the wall read 6. The snow fell heavily outside, and inside the house, the silence seemed to scream. Richard was breathing heavily, but he still held my hand tightly, as if he wanted to give me courage until the last second. His tired eyes searched mine, and he whispered, "Evelyn, my love, take care of them. And never forget, you are stronger than you think." Immediately afterward, his chest rose for the last time, and then there was a silence so profound that it still pains me to remember it. I held him close, crying like a lost child. That man who had been my constant companion, my best friend, my refuge, was leaving before my eyes, taking 40 years of my life with him. The days that followed were a blur. I could barely get out of bed, but every corner of the house seemed to whisper Richard's name. The armchair where he read the newspaper, the forgotten coffee cup in the kitchen, the tie still hanging on the back of the bedroom door. Everything screamed his absence. Melissa and David, though physically present, were distant, cold, as if their grief were just a detail. I, on the other hand, was drowning in nostalgia. I spent hours reliving memories. The day Richard came home with flowers stolen from the neighbor's garden just to make me smile. The sparkle in his eyes when he held Melissa in his arms for the first time. The nervous laughter when he tried to teach David to ride a bike and fell before the boy. Small scenes that formed the story of our family, a story built on love, faith, and sacrifice. It was this love that kept me going. I thought that, even in pain, we still had the union of our children to sustain us. I believed that Melissa and David would be my solace, my strength, Richard's continuation in this world. But fate, crueler than I ever imagined, had another truth in store for me. 2 weeks. Only 2 weeks had passed since I buried Richard, the man who had been my rock for 40 years. I still woke in the middle of the night, expecting to hear the creaking floorboards as he went to the kitchen for a drink of water. I still reached for the side of the bed, seeking his warmth, only to find the cold emptiness of the sheets. Grief was a constant specter, sitting with me at the table, walking the halls with me, lying with me every night. That day, I was sitting in the room I'd shared with Richard our entire lives. The sun streamed through the curtains, illuminating the framed photo on the nightstand. It was the photo of us on Cape Cod, smiling with the wind ruffling my hair, and Richard hugging me as if the whole world could fit within that gesture. I was clutching the photo to my chest when I heard a sharp knock on the door. "Mom, we need to talk." It was Melissa's voice, cold, without any tenderness. They walked in without waiting for my answer. Melissa had her arms crossed, her eyes hard. David paced back and forth, as if preparing for a rehearsed confession. For a moment, my naive heart believed they were coming to comfort me, perhaps proposing we spend more time together to ease the loneliness. But all it took was Melissa opening her mouth for me to feel my world crumble once again. "We sold your jewelry, Mother." I felt my entire body freeze. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard correctly. I put my hand to my chest, trying to find the strength to speak. "What? What do you mean, my jewelry?" David then added, without the slightest trace of remorse in his voice. "With the money, we'll buy a house in Europe. It's time for us to start our lives over, far from here. You understand? Don't you?" Understand? I could hardly believe it. These weren't the children I'd raised. They weren't the boys who ran around the garden, whom Richard rocked in his arms with lullabies. Their words were like stabs to my heart, still open with grief. "But they were souvenirs from your father, our wedding ring, the necklace he gave me when you were born. How could they?" My voice broke, more like a lament than a question. Melissa stared at me as if staring at an uncomfortable burden. "Mom, you're always clinging to the past. Jewelry won't bring Dad back. We need to move on, and we won't get stuck in memories of the dead." The silence that followed was deafening. Something inside me had broken irreversibly. I, who so often gave them my last piece of bread to eat. I, who sewed clothes at night to pay for their education. I, who gave up my dreams so they could achieve theirs. Now I saw in my children's eyes not gratitude, but the coldness of ambition. I felt betrayed in a way no words can describe. The jewelry wasn't just gold and stones, they were pieces of my life. Chapters in a story I'd built alongside Richard with sweat, tears, and love. The engagement ring he'd bought in installments because he had no money. The bracelet engraved with Melissa's name, a gift for her 15th birthday. The brooch that belonged to my mother, passed down from generation to generation. Each piece carried a memory, a gesture of affection, a symbol of our family. And they sold everything. They sold not only the jewelry, but they sold my trust. They sold what little faith I had left in my family. My teary eyes searched their faces for any sign of regret. But all I saw was impatience. David wasn't even looking at me. He was already leafing through a travel magazine featuring colorful photos of Tuscany. Melissa, her brow raised, seemed pleased to finally put an end to my connection with the past. "Are you going to leave me here, alone? Is that really what you're saying?" I asked, my voice trembling, impatiently. "Mom, you're strong. You'll survive. But we can't throw away our youth taking care of a house full of ghosts." I was still trying to process the news that my jewelry had been sold when Melissa, with an almost rehearsed tone, decided to add to the scam. "Mom, you have to understand. We didn't do this just for us. We did it for you, too. Boston is all sadness now. Every corner reminds me of Dad. You'll stay right here, caring for your memories, while we start over." I tried to interrupt, my voice breaking. "Start over? Where are you going?" It was then that David, filled with an excitement that sounded like venom to me, replied, "To Italy, Mom. Florence. We've already seen some houses. It's a dream. Ancient streets, lively cafes, art everywhere. We'll finally have the life we always deserved." I felt a tightness in my chest. Their "we" didn't include me. It was a future designed without me. Melissa adjusted her bag on her shoulder and added, "We left you some money, Mom. Symbolic, but enough for your needs. It's on the kitchen table. You don't need much, do you? The house is already paid for, and you barely spend anything living alone." I slowly raised my head, looking into her eyes, and asked almost in a whisper, "Is that all I am to you now?" "A bare necessity." She looked away impatiently. David tried to sound sweet, but his voice held only formality. "Mom, we'll write letters, we promise. You'll hear from us, maybe even see pictures of our new home. It'll be like you're there with us." My heart was breaking. I knew those promises were like smoke. No piece of paper in the mail, no photograph could replace their presence. The room fell into a heavy silence. I wanted to scream, to beg them to stay, to remind them of every night I held them in my arms, every sacrifice I made on their behalf. But the words stuck in my throat, choked with disbelief. So, without further ado, Melissa grabbed the small suitcase she'd left near the door. David put on his coat, adjusting the collar calmly, as if he were going out for a stroll. Neither of them came over to hug me. Neither of them kissed my forehead. Neither of them even turned to look me in the eye. They just walked to the door, Melissa said, almost in a bureaucratic tone. "Take care, Mom." And that was it. The door slammed shut behind them with a loud bang that seemed to echo throughout the house. The silence that remained was different from the silence of Richard's death. This was a silence of abandonment, of contempt, of absolute emptiness. I stood there, motionless, staring at the still jiggling doorknob. I felt as if life had been ripped from me for the second time. First, death took Richard, now ingratitude took my children. And this time, they walked away of their own free will, without looking back. I was in the kitchen, holding the now cooled cup of coffee in my hands, when my phone vibrated. My heart raced for a moment. Part of me still hoped, even after everything, that they would back down, that they would apologize. But no. It was just a message in the family group. The photo unfolded before my eyes, Melissa and David smiling, each holding a glass of cheap wine from the duty-free shop, with the illuminated Boston Logan International Airport sign in the background. Their smiles felt like a victory, not a goodbye. Below the image, Melissa's caption, "We're leaving. Mom, a new beginning awaits us in Florence. Don't worry, we'll send you letters and souvenirs. Oh, take care and enjoy the money we left," David added. "Think of us as birds that need to fly away from the nest. It's better this way. We love you, but the past needs to be left behind." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I looked at the photo again. The two of them embraced, radiant, as if I'd never existed. No sign of mourning, no respect for Richard's memory, just a rush to turn the page, as if I were an annoying stain on their stories. I touched the screen with trembling fingers, as if I could reach through it and summon them back. But all I could feel was the bitter taste of tears streaming down my lips. In that moment, I understood that they weren't just boarding a plane to another country. They were leaving me, away from everything we'd built, away from everything I believed was family love. The days that followed Melissa and David's departure were the longest of my life. I woke up every morning without really knowing why I was getting up. The house, which had already felt too big since Richard left, now felt like a desert, a space full of echoes and ghosts. Every corner held a memory. The wall clock Richard patiently repaired whenever it stopped working. The dining table where, for so many years, we'd laughed together as our children talked about school. The sofa where Melissa slept, wrapped in blankets on cold winter nights. Everything was there, intact, but the life that once filled those spaces had vanished. I'd sit alone at the table drinking coffee, and the silence was so heavy it hurt my ears. Richard's chair remained empty, and on impulse, I'd place a second cup on the table, as if he'd sit down at any moment. When I realized what I'd done, the tears would come like a flood. The nights were even worse. The wind blew against the windows, and darkness seemed to creep through the hallways of the house. I lay in bed, hugging his pillow, breathing in the scent that still lingered on his pillowcase. I closed my eyes and prayed, asking God to let me dream of Richard, just to see him one more time, even if only for a few seconds. I tried to occupy my time. I swept the yard, washed the dishes, tidied the closets, but nothing worked. My mind always returned to the same place. Melissa's cold face telling me my jewelry had been sold, David's excitement talking about the house in Italy, and the photo of them smiling at the airport as if the world belonged to them. Sometimes I would sit on the porch and watch the neighboring families, the laughter of children playing in the street, the sound of a mother calling her children to dinner. It all tore at me inside. I wondered where I had failed, where my children had become strangers. The letters they promised never arrived. Not a call, not even a message to check if I was alive. The amount they left on the kitchen table felt more like a handout than a care. I didn't touch that money. I left it there, a cruel reminder of how much I had been reduced to bare necessities in their lives. And so, day after day, I felt like a widow twice over, first of the man I loved, then of the children I raised. My grief over Richard's death mingled with my grief for Melissa and David, who were alive but had chosen to bury me alive. In the solitude of my home, I learned what true silence is, not the kind that soothes, but the kind that weighs, that suffocates, that reminds us every minute that we have been left behind. That week felt like every other since Richard left, heavy, silent, and aimless. I had given up hope for anything from life until the phone rang. The shrill sound shattered the silence of the house, and for a moment my heart raced. Who could it be? I answered with a hoarse voice, still filled with sadness. Hello? On the other end, a firm, professional voice. Ms. Parker, this is Dr. William Harris, an attorney at Thompson & Harris in New York. I need to speak with you personally. This is a matter concerning your late husband, Richard Parker. My heart sank. Richard, what do you mean? He was already gone, and yet he seemed to be calling to me from somewhere far away. I pressed the phone to my ear, my palms sweating. About Richard? What exactly do you mean? The lawyer took a deep breath, as if weighing each word. I'd rather explain everything in person. Would it be possible for you to come to New York this week? It's something important that directly concerns you. I accepted, almost without thinking. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of the room, trembling. I didn't know whether to be afraid or hopeful, but something inside me, perhaps Richard's own voice, said I had to go. 2 days later, I took a train to New York. The entire trip was a mix of anxiety and memories. I looked out the window and remembered the times when Richard and I dreamed of traveling more, of seeing the world after our children graduated. He always said, "One day, Evelyn, I'll show you Paris." The irony cut me to the core. Paris never arrived, but now New York awaited me with secrets I never imagined. Arriving at the lawyer's office, my legs felt weak. The place was imposing, with dark wood furniture and shelves filled with heavy books. Doctor Harris greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing look. He asked me to sit down and placed a black folder on the desk, with Richard's name written in gold letters. Mrs. Parker, your husband trusted you greatly. Before he passed away, he left clear and confidential instructions. Richard had an account in his sole name, something not even his children knew about. He left this asset to you as a form of protection. I felt my entire body tremble. I put my hand over my mouth, unable to speak. Account? But Richard never said anything about it. We've always shared everything. How is that possible? When Dr. Harris opened the black folder with Richard's name on it, my heart skipped a beat. He adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and said calmly, Mrs. Parker, what I'm about to show you has been kept strictly confidential by your husband. Richard Parker left a considerable amount of money in investments, all registered exclusively in his name. My voice barely came out. Investments. Richard never said anything. We always shared everything. How much is that amount? He looked at me seriously, as if preparing the groundwork for me not to crumble. We're talking about approximately $2 million. Investments he made throughout his life, patiently and strategically. Stocks, real estate funds, a few side businesses he managed discreetly. Everything built little by little, with the vision of someone who wanted to ensure his family's security. I felt my breath catch. I put my hand to my chest, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. 2 million. Richard, my Richard, the simple man who always seemed so transparent, had hidden an entire fortune from me. 2 million? Are you saying Richard had this and never told me? Why? Why keep such a secret? My voice was shaky, a mix of disbelief and pain. The lawyer leaned forward, his expression compassionate. He told me on several occasions that he didn't want you to worry about money. He wanted you to live in peace, taking care of the house, the children, and himself. He knew that if life took an unexpected turn, this reserve would be your shield. His own words, one day she'll need this. And when she does, I want her to feel protected by me, even after I'm gone. In that moment, I couldn't hold back the tears. I felt as if Richard were sitting there beside me, squeezing my hand the way he always did when he wanted to encourage me. He had thought of me even in silence, even in secret. He knew I would need, I murmured, more to myself than to the lawyer. Harris nodded, sliding the bank statements toward me. The papers were filled with unrealistic numbers. Everything is in legal order, Mrs. Parker. There are no disputes, no loopholes. The assets are protected in your name, and only you can move them. Richard was meticulous to the end. I ran my fingers through the pages, but I wasn't just seeing numbers. I was seeing years of silent effort, nights when Richard said he needed to work late, quick trips he never quite explained. Every detail now made sense. He was building a secure future for me, even without telling me. I looked up, my eyes still watering. Dr. Harris, do you understand what this means? My children abandoned me, sold my jewelry, left me alone. And even in death, Richard reaches out to me. He continues to care for me. The lawyer looked at me respectfully, and his voice sounded almost like a blessing. Yes, Mrs. Parker. Mr. Richard believed that true love does not end with death. And from what I see, he was right. I left that New York office with my briefcase clutched tightly. $2 million didn't just mean wealth. It was proof that my husband, even in silence, had never stopped loving me. And in that moment, I made a promise. I would use that inheritance not for show, but to rescue what my children had thrown away. I would bring back every jewel, every memory, every piece of our history, because Richard's legacy would not be buried along with their ingratitude. The day after the lawyer's revelation, I woke up feeling different. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt a sense of purpose. I picked up the phone and started calling jewelry stores in Boston. I jotted down names, descriptions, sale dates. I grasped every lead I could find with all my might. It didn't take long to find my first trace. The engagement ring Richard had placed on my finger with trembling hands 40 years ago. When the jeweler brought out the velvet box and opened it before me, my hands trembled. There it was, simple, worn by time, but filled with the entire story of our love. I paid the price without arguing and left the store crying, feeling as if Richard were embracing me again. The next morning, I packed my bags and caught a train to New York. I spent hours researching online, calling antique dealers, asking about every piece I could think of. Sometimes the clerks looked at me with disdain, as if I were a deluded old woman chasing ghosts. But I didn't care. Each no only made me insist more. In Dallas, I found the pearl necklace Richard gave me when Melissa was born. I remember it like it was yesterday. He walked into the hospital room with the sloppy, nervous bundle and smiled like a boy. When I held the necklace again, I smelled the hospital, heard newborn Melissa's cries, and heard Richard's words, "You are the best mother I could have asked for our daughter." I continued the journey, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I spent nights in cheap hotels, spreadsheets open on my computer, scribbling maps and addresses in a notebook. The day I found David's bracelet, engraved with his name, my heart nearly stopped. I remembered his first birthday, Richard chasing our little boy in the garden while I laughed at the sight. That cold metal brought back the warm laughter of my little son. Each piece of jewelry I recovered was a battle won. I walked into stores with determination, described the details of each piece, and when I found it, I paid what they asked. There was no negotiating. I wasn't buying gold. I was rescuing pieces of my life. At night, alone in my hotel room, I would spread my jewelry out on the bed. I would run my fingers over it as if caressing vivid memories. I would cry. I would pray. I would talk to Richard as if he were sitting beside me, and somehow I knew he was. The merchant saw me as a strange customer, but I saw myself as a hunter. A silent hunter who crisscrossed the United States in search of her own shattered soul. And, piece by piece, I was rebuilding everything my children had tried to destroy. It didn't matter how much it cost. I had Richard's inheritance, but more than that, I had his strength within me. And I promised myself, Every jewel would come home. After retrieving the jewelry, my heart was at peace, and I was sitting peacefully on my porch when the phone rang. I answered it without rushing. Mom. Mom. It was David. His voice came out shaky, raspy, as if each word was scraping his throat. Answer me, please. It's me. My chest sank. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The cold wind blew through the trees, stirring up the smell of wet earth. I pressed the phone to my ear. I'm listening, David. There was a sob, then another. In the background, I recognized Melissa's voice, high-pitched, restrained, like someone trying not to break down in public. Mom, something happened, he began. The house we were going to buy, wasn't real. We lost the money. We were left with nothing. I closed my eyes. The silence between us was heavy. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to say, I told you so. But all of that seemed small compared to the crying of a child. Where are you? I asked. Santa Maria Novella Station, in Florence. We have our bags, documents, and cell phones, but we have no money left. Not even enough to eat properly. We made a mistake, Mom. Melissa's voice came in suddenly, low, broken. I'm so sorry, Mom. I said horrible things. I thought the pain would go away if we left, that a new house would erase everything. But the pain came with us. A lump rose in my throat. I glanced at the empty chair next to me, the place where Richard usually sat in the late afternoon. I touched the wooden armrest as if I were touching him. Are you safe? Yes. David took a deep breath. We have our passports, our bags, some coats, but the hotel kicked us out when we couldn't pay. We slept sitting up today. I didn't know my body ached so much from exhaustion and shame at the same time. The word shame shot through me. I wanted to say I knew this weight, that I too had slept sitting up for days, my head resting against it in Richard's absence. Instead, I spoke slowly. What do you need? There was a silence that I recognized. The silence of someone who doesn't dare ask for what they want, afraid of hearing a no. We need to go back, Melissa whispered. If you can send the money for the tickets, that's all. We'll go back. We'll work. We'll fix it. My heart pounded. I thought of all the words I'd received like knives, memories of the dead, symbolic sum. I thought of the empty drawers where my memories once slept, and yet the instinct that awakened me was the same as when they were little and came running with scraped knees, to care. How much does it cost for you two to come back tomorrow? I heard the hurried sound of fingers on the screen, voices in the background, announcements in Italian cutting through the connection like blades. David returned. Mom, there's a flight from Florence to Lisbon and from Lisbon to Boston. It's enough for both of us. It's cheaper this way. But it's expensive for us now. Give me the account number, bank name, IBAN, everything correct. I'll make the transfer now. There was a silent gasp. Then Melissa cried in a different way, not the cry of fear, but the cry of surrender. Will you help us, even after everything? I'm your mother, I replied, my voice firm. Helping doesn't erase what you did, but it stops you from falling any deeper. The rest, we'll talk about it, looking each other in the eye. David dictated the data in a trembling voice. Name, David Parker. Bank, Intesa San Paolo. IBAN, he spelled, stumbling slightly. Swift, BTI Titm, amount of both tickets and something for food until boarding. I wrote down every letter, every number, repeating slowly so as not to make a mistake. Right there on the porch, I accessed the bank app. My fingers trembled, not from anger, but from the weight of the moment. The world seemed suspended between sending and confirmation. I tapped transfer. Ready, he said, seconds later. Check if it fell. A short pause. I heard notification beeps on the other end, a breath of disbelief. It fell, David said, almost voiceless. Mom, it fell. Melissa wept openly. Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve this kindness. I thought a mother's love had limits. You're proving that it doesn't. I took a deep breath. The sky was beginning to swallow the last trace of light. The first star appeared. I spoke softly, as if speaking to myself. A mother's love has a measure. It is precisely the measure of truth. When you return, the truth will accompany us. You will work. You will ask for forgiveness, not with words, but with actions. You will rebuild what you tore down. Yes, David replied without hesitation. I'm in. I need to. I want to go home. Buy the tickets for tomorrow morning, I ordered. Send me the time, flight number, and receipt. I'll pick you up at the airport. Mom, Melissa murmured, do you still call it home? I looked inside. The silent room, the wedding portrait on the bookshelf, the recovered jewelry sleeping like tiny suns inside the velvet box. I felt Richard close, like a breeze on my face. I do, I replied, because home is the place where truth returns. We stayed connected for a few seconds only by our breathing. From the other side, I heard a metallic announcement in Italian, suitcase wheels scraping the floor, the whole world rushing by, unaware of the three of us. Mom, thank you, David said finally. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow. I hung up slowly. The phone was heavy in my hands, but the weight was different. The weight of a decision not made with the head, but with that which endures even when everything breaks, the heart. I stood there on the porch as night fell. I ran my palm over the arm of Richard's chair and silently spoke to him as I always do. They're coming back, my love. Not because they deserve it yet, but because they need it, and because I'm their mother. When they arrive, you'll lend me your strength, that calm you had in your eyes, so I can teach them to live in a way that honors our name. The breeze responded with a slight shiver on my skin. I went inside, closed the door, and went to prepare the house, not for the triumphant return of my children, but for the difficult and honest beginning of what would come next. I was on the porch when I saw the taxi pull up in front of the house. Melissa and David got out slowly, each carrying a small suitcase, their clothes wrinkled, their faces drawn. They weren't the same children who'd left the airport with smiles. Now they were hunched over like defeated soldiers, their eyes not filled with pride but with shame. I opened the gate silently. They approached hesitantly. David was the first to speak. Mom, we have no words. Melissa lowered her head, unable to look at me. I watched them in silence for a few seconds, letting them feel the weight of their own conscience. Then I took a deep breath and said, Come in. Inside the house, the air felt charged. They sat side by side on the couch, like two children awaiting an inevitable scolding. I stood before them, resting my hands on the back of a chair. So, tell me, I want to hear it from your lips. What happened? Melissa was the one who answered, her voice breaking. The house in Italy never existed, Mom. The real estate agent was a fraud. He took our money and disappeared. We were left with nothing. We slept in train stations, begged for food, were humiliated. We had no choice, only to think about going back. But even for that, we depended on you. David finished, embarrassed. We still have our passports, our documents, but that's it. We lost everything. The jewelry, the money, everything is gone. And now we're here, with nothing but the shame of looking at you. Tears filled my eyes, but I stood firm. I walked up to them and, staring into their faces, said, You left me alone when I needed you most. You sold your father's memories, mocked my pain, and walked away like I was dead weight. And now you come back broken, expecting what? For me to pretend nothing happened. Melissa finally lifted her face, wet with tears. We don't expect anything, Mom. We just want a chance to start over. We just want your forgiveness, David added, his voice breaking. I was arrogant, Mom. I thought I knew more than you, that I could build a future without looking back. But I was blind. Now I understand that nothing in the world is worth more than the love we leave behind. And I left yours. My heart sank. The urge to hug them was overwhelming, but I held back. A mother's love is immense, but it must teach. I am your mother. I never stopped being. And I will always love you, even when my heart bleeds because of your choices. You must understand that nothing is easy, that life doesn't offer priceless shortcuts. Now you will live here, but you will work. You will fight for your own sustenance. The time of comfort is over. Melissa nodded, crying. We accept, Mom. We don't want any more illusions. We want to learn. We want to be worthy of you and of Dad's memory. At that moment, a tear escaped my eyes, but I quickly wiped it away so they wouldn't see the emotion that was overwhelming me. They couldn't know that I had already recovered all the jewels, nor the secret Richard had left me. This would be my silent treasure, kept as protection and also as a lesson. I walked over, put my hands on their shoulders, and said, Forgiveness exists, but trust? That takes time. You're going to have to rebuild it, day after day. They stood up hesitantly, and then something happened I hadn't seen in a long time. Melissa and David hugged me together, tight like old times. I felt their weight in my arms, smelled the dust, the journey, the defeat. But I also felt, for the first time in a long time, that there was a spark of truth in that embrace. I said nothing about what I was hiding. Not about the jewelry that was already back in my room, not about Richard's secret gift. I just closed my eyes and silently thanked God for giving me the strength not to give in to resentment. They returned, broken, humiliated, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and shame. But they returned. And, as a mother, it was my job not only to welcome them, but to teach them. This time through pain, through truth, and through the love that endures even the greatest betrayals. That first night, I let Melissa and David settle into the room that had once been theirs. Their small suitcases sat in a corner, nearly empty, a symbol of defeat. I looked at them both lying huddled together and felt a pang in my chest. They were still my children, still flesh of my flesh. But they were also the same ones who had left me alone when I needed them most. At breakfast the next morning, I called them to the table. I set out 3 cups, just like old times. But there was a difference. My voice was firmer, my posture more erect. You've come home, but things won't be the same. I won't tolerate laziness or fantasy. If you want to stay, you'll have to work. Every penny that comes into this house must be honored with effort. Melissa lowered her head, silent tears streaming down her face. David tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Mom, we have nothing. How are we going to get anything? I looked at him firmly. You're young, you're healthy, you're documented, you're self-employed. That's already far more than many in the world. Anyone who betrayed their own mother to pursue an illusion might as well face reality now. You're going to look for work. You'll only stay here if you find work. The silence was heavy. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. It was as if the whole house held its breath, waiting for their reaction. Melissa wiped her tears with the back of her hand and replied softly, I accept, Mom. If it's the only way to start over, I accept. David took longer. He leaned his elbows on the table, ran his hands over his face, and finally murmured, I accept it too. I'm tired of chasing empty dreams. I want to rebuild, even if it's brick by brick. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let my voice waver. A mother's love never ends. But respect, trust, the value of life, these must be learned. You traded the unconditional love I always gave you for a fantasy. Now you'll feel the weight of that firsthand. Only then will you understand. After breakfast, Melissa and David went out to look for a job. Melissa tied her hair in a simple bun and wore a faded blue dress. David wore a light, hastily pressed shirt. On the kitchen table, I left a folder with resumes we'd prepared the night before. I watched them from the porch as they walked down the street together, carrying not only paperwork but also the weight of shame and hope. The first attempts were difficult. At the end of the day, they returned with their heads down, their eyes weary. David threw his briefcase on the sofa and sighed deeply. Mom, nobody wants me. They say I have no experience. They always ask for someone trained, someone ready. I approached, touched his shoulder, and replied firmly, "You'll hear a lot of no's, my son, but all it takes is one yes to change everything. Don't give up. What you lost wasn't just money, it was dignity. Now is the time to win it back." Melissa, even though dejected, still had a glimmer of hope. "No one called me today, Mom, but a store manager said I seemed eager to learn. She asked me to come back next week. That's something, isn't it?" I cupped her face in my hands and smiled. "Yes, it is, daughter. Every door that opens a crack is a sign that you're changing. Keep knocking." The following days were a struggle. They left early and returned late, often with sore feet and red eyes from exhaustion. Sometimes they fell silent, other times they poured out their hearts. I watched them with my heart torn between pain and pride. Pain at seeing them suffer, pride at seeing them finally fight. And then one day, the first victories arrived. Melissa walked through the door, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. Her hand smelled of flour, and she wore a simple uniform from a local bakery. "Mom, I got a job. I'll work behind the counter and cleaning. It's not much, but it's a start." I hugged her tightly, feeling her heart beat faster. "Daughter, it's a lot. It's dignity. It's the first step to rebuilding your life." A few days later, it was David's turn. He arrived home wearing a simple supermarket badge, still surprised by his own achievement. "Mom, I made it. I'm going to work in the warehouse, organizing boxes, helping with loading. I never thought I'd do this, but when I signed the contract, I felt a strange feeling. I felt proud of myself. My eyes filled with tears. This pride, my son, is called dignity. Now you understand the value of every penny, the weight of every choice. Now you are learning." The following weeks were a slow but profound transformation. Melissa would wake up before dawn, put on her uniform, and rush out the door. She'd return exhausted, but always with a small smile on her face, bringing stories from the bakery, from customers who praised her friendliness. David, for his part, would return with aching arms, sweaty clothes, but with a firmer gaze. He learned to respect sweat, learned to value effort. At night, I would often find them in the kitchen, recounting the day's hardships, exchanging confidences like true brothers. It was as if their pain had brought them closer than anything else. I simply watched, silently thanking God for finally seeing signs of change. Weeks turned into months. The house, which had once seemed a tomb of silence and abandonment, was now filled with the sound of keys turning in the door at the end of the day, the tired but lively voices of Melissa and David returning from work. They were no longer the same children who had once departed with pride and illusion. Now, they arrived with wrinkled uniforms, calloused hands, but firmer eyes. I observed every gesture, every detail. Melissa, her clothes always stained with flour from the bakery, came in smelling of warm bread and fresh coffee. David arrived with his arms aching from the store, but with a small smile, knowing he was achieving something on his own. That night, when they sat down at the table, I noticed something different. Melissa was fidgeting, fiddling with her napkin with trembling hands. David also seemed nervous, looking at me as if rehearsing difficult words. "Mom," Melissa began, her voice breaking, "we need to talk to you." I placed the teacup on the table and remained silent, letting them continue. David took a deep breath, lowered his eyes, and said, "We hurt you in ways that not even time can erase. We sold Dad's jewelry, the jewelry that represented your entire lives. We left you alone when you needed us most. We abandoned you." Melissa wiped her tears with the back of her hand and continued, "I remember every cruel word you said. I remember your wounded look. Ever since that day, Mom, I've carried a weight on my chest. I regret it so much that sometimes I can't sleep. You didn't deserve anything we did." Silence fell over the room. I could feel my heart racing. They spoke truthfully, without masks. I saw the tears welling in their eyes, saw their sincere regret, and for the first time, I realized they understood the value of the love they had lost. I approached slowly, placed my hands over theirs, and said firmly, but with a choked voice, "You betrayed me, it's true. You traded a mother's love for a fantasy, but still, here you are, back. It wasn't an easy life that brought you here. It was pain, and pain teaches. You've changed. I see it in every gesture, in every word." David burst into tears, hiding his face in his hands. Melissa stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me tightly, like she hadn't done since she was a teenager. "Forgive us, Mom. Please. We ask for nothing more. Just your forgiveness." I felt my eyes well up. I hugged them both at the same time, feeling their bodies tremble against mine. A mother's forgiveness isn't given by words, it's given by the heart, and my heart, even wounded, will always be yours. But in that moment, I felt there was still something to be done. Something I'd kept secret since the beginning of our grief. I stepped back, took a deep breath, and said, "There's something I need to show you." They looked at each other, confused. I walked to the bedroom and returned with a heavy velvet box wrapped in silk. I placed it on the table and opened it before them. Inside, the recovered jewels gleamed, the engagement ring, the pearl necklace, the bracelet engraved with David's name. Each piece seemed to carry not only the shine of gold, but also the weight of the tears I'd shed while rescuing them. Melissa brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. "Mom, how did you do it?" David, his eyes wide, touched the bracelet carefully, as if afraid of breaking it. "We thought they were lost forever. You brought them back?" I nodded, with a sad smile. "Yes. While you chased illusions, I chased our story. I traveled, I searched, I paid every penny without complaint. Each jewel I recovered was like bringing back a piece of your father. I wouldn't let our memory die because of your ambition." Melissa's tears flowed uncontrollably. She fell to her knees before me. "I don't deserve this, Mom. I don't deserve any of this. You should have turned your back on us, let us disappear, but instead, you gave us a second chance." I knelt before her, cupped her wet face, and said, "A mother's love isn't measured by merit. If it were, you wouldn't be here. A mother's love is the force that transforms the cruelest betrayal into a lesson. You made a mistake, but now you're learning, and that's what matters." It was then that I revealed the final secret. Richard also thought of you. He left something in my name so that I would never want for anything. He trusted that one day this inheritance would not only be mine, but ours, once you understood the value of life. I have waited for this moment, and now I know. You are ready to listen." They looked at each other, stunned. David swallowed. "An inheritance. Dad." I smiled, caressing his hands. "Yes." He believed that even after death, he could still protect us. And he was right. Today, you've proven that you've changed, that you've learned through sweat, pain, and regret. Now, what was once just a kept secret will also be our chance to rebuild as a family. Melissa pressed her forehead against mine and wept silently. David, holding my hand tightly, said, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave up on you." And there, amidst tears, hugs, and promises, I realized that the forgiveness that heals all wounds had finally arrived. It didn't erase the pain of the past, but transformed it into something greater, an eternal lesson. I looked at David first, seeing in him the boy who once brought flowers from the garden, apologizing for breaking my favorite vase. Then at Melissa, who at 8 years old cried in my lap whenever she had nightmares. Where had those children who loved me unconditionally gone? "Every month, you will receive a sum," I announced, watching as her eyes widened in surprise. "It won't be all at once, just a calculated portion. This amount will serve to help build your path, but not to sustain it completely." David swallowed, his hands curling into nervous fists on his knees. Melissa held her breath, as if any movement might make this second chance disappear. But there's one non-negotiable condition, I continued, my voice gaining the firmness I'd learned during the most difficult months of my life. You'll only be entitled to this money if you remain employed. If you lose your job due to negligence, irresponsibility, or laziness, you'll stop receiving it immediately. And when I'm gone from this world, whatever remains will be divided equally between you two. The impact of my words was immediate. Melissa let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She brought her hands to her face, trying to hold back the tears that were already overflowing, and murmured through her fingers, "Mom, you trust us like this, after everything we've done, after we sold Dad's memories, after we planned to abandon you." I approached her, knelt before the sofa, and took her trembling hands in mine. I felt the calluses that working in the shop had left on her palms, marks of a transformation I had witnessed day after day. "I trust you, my daughter," I replied with all the tenderness a mother can muster. "But not blindly, as I did before. Money is just a tool, a means. Character, daily effort, and the dignity earned through one's own sweat must come first. Only then will the gift your father kept silent for so many years truly have meaning." David, who had remained silent, suddenly lowered his head. I saw his shoulders shake even before I heard the first sob. Tears began to stream down his face, dripping onto the floor like drops of genuine regret. "I failed you so much, Mother." Her voice was broken, filled with a pain I recognized as real. "I sold Dad's most precious memories for dirty money. I left you alone when you needed us most. I planned to abandon you as if you were a burden, not the woman who dedicated her entire life to raising us." He looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw the vulnerable boy hiding behind the disillusioned man. "Today, Mom, every box I carry to the supermarket weighs more than usual. Not because of the physical effort, but because each one reminds me of the weight of the terrible choices I've made. Every drop of sweat is a way of paying off a debt I may never be able to fully repay." His voice faltered, and he had to pause for a deep breath before continuing. "But hearing this now, knowing that there's still hope for me, that you haven't completely given up, gives me the strength to keep trying to be the son I should have been all along. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not turning your back on me when I deserved it." I stood up and walked over to him, reaching out to stroke his hair the way I used to when he was a boy and came home from school bruised. I could feel the rough strands, dried out by the sun from manual labor, so different from the silky hair I used to comb before he slept. "True love doesn't give up, my son," I whispered, my own voice cracking. "It teaches with patience, it corrects with firmness, it waits with hope. And now it's your turn to show me that you've learned the most important lesson, that family isn't abandoned. Family is built every day." Melissa wiped her tears with the back of her hand and stood, standing before me. Her posture had changed. There was a new dignity in her shoulders, a determination I hadn't seen in years. "I accept all the conditions, Mother," he declared in a firm voice, though still trembling with emotion. "I will keep working. I will keep proving every day that I deserve this second chance. I want every penny I receive to be the fruit of my sweat, my effort, not an easy shortcut or an undeserved inheritance." She looked me in the eyes with an intensity that reminded me of the determined girl she had been before she lost her way. "I solemnly promise that I will honor you and Dad. I will make every penny count. I will manage it wisely, and I will prove that your trust is not in vain. I will never disappoint you again." I looked at them both, my children transformed by pain and time, and felt my heart warm in a way I hadn't experienced in months. There before me were no longer the selfish young men who had abandoned me in search of empty illusions. These were two souls genuinely transformed by experience, now ready to value what they had once so easily dismissed. I walked slowly to the antique cabinet in the living room, the one Richard had inherited from his mother. With careful hands, I opened the secret drawer known only to me and removed 2 envelopes I had prepared weeks ago. Each had a child's name written in my most careful handwriting. I walked back to them and placed an envelope in front of each of them on the coffee table. "Here's the first installment," I announced solemnly. "It's not much, but it's the beginning of a new journey. I want you to learn to manage every penny, to plan for the future, to save wisely. I want you to understand, once and for all, that wealth without wisdom is just an open invitation to utter ruin." They opened the envelopes with reverent care, almost fear, as if they didn't feel worthy of what they were receiving. I saw genuine gratitude on their faces, a gratitude I'd never seen when they'd simply asked for money in the past. David held the paper between his trembling fingers, looking at the numbers as if they were sacred. Mom, you're not just giving us money." Her voice was filled with deep emotion. "You're giving us something much more valuable, trust. You're giving us the chance to prove that we can still be the children you deserve to have." Melissa, with renewed tears streaming down her face, suddenly stood up and wrapped me in a desperate, tight hug, as if she were trying to convey all the regret and love she had been holding back for months. "I thought I'd lost everything forever, Mom," he cried in my ear. "Your love, your trust, our family, your respect. I thought I'd destroyed everything sacred between us. But today, I realize we still have a golden opportunity, and I swear by all that is holy, we will not waste this opportunity." I opened my arms and hugged them both at the same time, feeling the warmth of their bodies against my chest, feeling their hearts race with emotion. In that moment of communion, I knew with absolute certainty that Richard, wherever he was, would be profoundly proud. He had guarded that treasure silently for so many years, working hard, making sacrifices, planning our future. But I realized in that moment that the greatest treasure wasn't the money in the bank. It was this lesson of love, forgiveness, and rebuilding that we were experiencing together. I pulled back slightly to look into my children's eyes and concluded with the wisdom that only years of suffering can give. A mother's true love is not about giving everything on a silver platter, making every step easy. It's about teaching by example that every genuine achievement has its fair price, that every choice we make has real consequences, and that only honest work and solid character sustain a life of true dignity. With tears of relief and hope in my eyes, I moved even closer and spoke softly, almost a whisper filled with love. "You are not only inheriting what your father left behind. You are also inheriting a precious second chance to start over, to be better, to build lives that have real meaning. Live up to it. Live up to the unconditional love that never, not even for a moment, failed you." And for the first time in many dark months, I felt a deep peace come over my heart. Not because I had money to give away, but because I had the unshakable certainty that my children had finally learned the value of what no amount of money can ever buy: genuine dignity, true repentance, and the transformative power of family reconciliation. Richard's legacy was complete, not just in monetary terms, but in human values that would endure for generations.